Greetings, everyone, and welcome back to another installment of the Mental Health Bytes podcast. I'm your host, Brandon Jones, Executive Director here at Minnesota Association for Children's Mental Health, better known as MACMH. And on today's episode, we are focusing on BIPOC Mental Health Month. Yes, BIPOC, Black, Indigenous, People of Color. Mental Health Month is kicking off right here, right now. And I'm going to share some information on and just some of my thoughts on why BIPOC Mental Health Month is important and why we celebrate it or why we focus on it. It's less of a celebration, more of an awareness piece and a focus. And that's what we're going to talk about on today's podcast. So the first thing and why this is important is really due to stigma. Yes, stigma. Stigma as not necessarily the fear of something, but this issue, this condition that we have in many communities of color around our interaction when it comes to therapeutic services, mental health just in general, and getting support around our emotional well-being. There's several levels and several factors that fall into this stigma. It isn't just about people of color don't want to receive mental health services. No. There is a ton of mistrust of systems, a lot of fear of judgment, a lot of pressure to be strong and have this uncanny ability of resilience. There's also this factor that healing looks different in different ethnic groups. Yes, healing does look different. And if we're going to be honest, a lot of our psychological disciplines here in this Western world are based off of particular cultural groups that don't always fit the context of everyone else. I often say that we need to advance some of our understandings and thoughts when it comes to mental health. A lot has changed since our forefathers in the psychology world have been here, but for some reason, we haven't really modified and updated or gave what I like to call the 2.0, 3.0 versions of those historical and ancient wisdom things that we utilize as kind of the foundation of how we do therapy and how we address mental health. So I think it's important for us to advance with the advancement of culture when it comes to these things to help reduce this whole concept of stigma. The next thing that I want to highlight and kind of just talk about, and really I'm just trying to get your brain wheels turning, I'm not really deep diving into too much on today's podcast, is the power of connection. BIPOC folks really lean on who you know, how you know, and why you know. And what I mean by that is the power of connection, the communal standpoint is very important in many communities. And in our world today around mental health, around therapeutic services, it's very individual based. I honestly think that there's a blend. I think you need a little bit of both. And I think one thing that has happened during the pandemic and why we've seen such this huge rush towards mental health treatment and emotional health treatment was that people were forced to be separated from folks. And I think that highlights our deeper desire as humans to be connected and have that communal power. And I hope that we start to see more communal healing opportunities show up, because I really think in this digital world that we live in, this virtual hybrid world that we live in, that's something that many of us are craving in one way or another, and it's probably impacting our mental and emotional well-being. So it's important that we look at family units when it comes to children's mental health and how important extended family units are. Look at faith communities and spiritual communities, something that we don't often talk about because we don't want to offend folks, but it is important to have those faith-based and those spiritual-based communities there for support. And then cultural traditions, not necessarily wiping out cultural traditions just because they may not have an actual word or concept or even approach that's similar to our approach in the Western world when it comes to therapy, but understanding how do those practices, those customs, those beliefs fit a well-being paradigm and how they help advance a people or a place or a child. And then also, these are all sources of strength, right? These are all sources of strength that we can utilize and emphasize and help us move forward. We really need to understand that mental health is not just an individual journey. It does involve the community. It does involve a collective action. And I hope that as we continue to build programs, serve young people and communities, we look at that and we add elements of that as we move forward. Which leads to my next point, building a support network. Relationships are important. Healthy relationships are important. We know that for children to be successful, especially children that have had trauma in their life, having at least one healthy adult makes a huge impact. But imagine having a community of healthy adults and what that does for a child's development. We really have to start building our support networks. One, for ourselves, because we're not immune to mental and emotional health and stress and things of that nature. But two, it really does provide an opportunity for children to grow up in a very healthy way. So building those networks, right? Start small, talk to people and start to build a rapport, an authentic rapport. Help to build that level of trust. Sometimes it starts with family members, sometimes it starts with friends. And let's be honest, sometimes it may start online with people you barely know, but you have a unified or kind of collective aim or interest, and you're able to build around that. But start somewhere. Don't try to go out at this alone. Start building your network is very important. Get the support you need, and don't be afraid to advocate for yourself to get it or your child. Look for cultural affirming supportive groups and parent circles is a good thing. And if you don't have them, start them, because you're probably not the only one who wants to do that. And I know everyone doesn't have that cavalier attitude to start things, but ask for what you want. Go somewhere and see if they can help you create it. Don't just sit idle and don't just be alone. I talked a little bit about this in my previous thing around power of connection, but involve your spiritual and community leaders as best as possible. These are folks who they've answered the call to lead. Sometimes they might not know that there's a approach or a particular need out there. So sometimes you may have to bring that to their attention. So lean on those folks who have already taken the call to leadership to help you get the things that you need. And then lastly, I would say normalize checking in and emotional conversations at home. Create that space for conversation. Engaging in dialogue is healthy. A lot of people, unfortunately, they shut that down. They repress that. Charity starts at home is a very common saying, and I definitely believe that. I think when things start to go wrong at home or uncomfortable at home, that's when we start to see a lot of the problems that we have in our world today. Lastly, as I want to close out today's podcast, I want to leave you with some encouragement. I come from the psychological discipline of Alfred Adler. Couldn't get that out. Sorry about that. Alfred Adler. And one of the sayings in Adlerian therapy is encouragement to a child is like water to a tree. Encouragement to a child is like water to a tree. This is so very important. Sometimes you encourage your children by your actions. Sometimes you encourage them by your words. But the goal is that both things are focused on when you are engaging around young people. Model the behaviors that you want them to see and let them know that you see them, right? You are not alone in this. Your story does matter. Your child's well-being matters. And I'm going to invite you all to explore our resource page on our website. It's macmh.org, macmh.org. And I want to inspire you all to share this episode as well with someone that you trust, because you can't go at this alone, and we all need encouragement. Do the best to take care of yourself during this month. Do the best to take care of someone that you know. And if you know someone is BIPOC or you're BIPOC yourself, take a moment for yourself, just a moment, 5 minutes, maybe 3, and do some sort of well-being practice just to ground yourself and to give yourself some recognition that your body, your mind, your soul, your spirit also needs a little bit of reassurance as we continue to navigate this world that we live in. All right, I'm Brandon Jones, Executive Director here at MACMH. This was the Mental Health Bytes. We'll check you again later. Take care. Bye-bye.